My name is Sarah. I am 28 years old, and I never thought the worst day of my professional life would also be the exact day my heart completely shattered. I was standing right in the middle of our open office floor, holding a cardboard box filled with my desk plants and a few coffee mugs, my face burning with the kind of intense humiliation that makes it hard to breathe. I had just been fired, publicly and brutally, for a disastrous error I knew with absolute certainty I did not commit. But the absolute worst part was not the loud, angry voice of my boss echoing in my ears, nor the pitiful stares of my coworkers around me. It was looking over at the desk right next to mine and seeing my best friend, the person I trusted most in the world, trying desperately to hide a cruel, mocking smile behind her hand. She was laughing at me. The floor felt like it was disappearing beneath my feet, and I was completely paralyzed by the shock of that betrayal. I slowly walked toward the elevator, feeling like my world had collapsed forever, when the building security guard stepped right into my path, looked around nervously, handed me a small folded piece of yellow paper, and whispered something that changed absolutely everything. Before I tell you exactly what was written on that tiny piece of paper and how it completely flipped my reality upside down, I want to take a quick second to ask you something important. I always wonder how far my personal stories travel and who's listening to them on the other side of the screen. So please tell me in the comments below, from which city and state are you watching or listening to this video right now? I really love reading your responses and knowing exactly where my experiences are reaching. Now, to make you truly understand the absolute devastation I felt in that terrible moment by the elevator, I need to take you back and explain how I ended up in that horrible situation to begin with. You see, the pain of a betrayal is never just about the specific action itself. It is about the long history you share with the person who holds the knife. My best friend Chloe, 28 years old, was not just a coworker to me. We had known each other since our very first year of college. We shared tiny dorm rooms, survived on cheap instant noodles, cried over broken hearts, and dreamed endlessly about our futures together. When we finally graduated, it felt like a massive victory when we both managed to get entry-level jobs at the exact same marketing agency in the city. I honestly thought it was the ultimate dream to navigate the tough adult corporate world with your chosen sister right by your side. But I was incredibly naive. I did not realize that while I saw our relationship as a true partnership, she saw it as a competition. I was always the quiet, hardworking one who stayed late to double-check the spreadsheets. She was the loud, charismatic one who knew how to make the higher-ups laugh. I thought we balanced each other out perfectly. Looking back now, the red flags were always waving right in front of my face. I just deliberately chose to ignore them because I loved her like a sister. There were so many times when I would spend my entire weekend researching a complicated new campaign strategy, only for her to casually mention my ideas as her own during our Monday morning team meetings. When I would confront her later, feeling hurt and confused, she would always brush it off with a bright, innocent smile. She would tell me that we were a team, that a win for her was a win for us both, and that she only spoke up because I was too shy to do it myself. I swallowed those pathetic excuses every single time. I wanted to believe her. I completely convinced myself that I was being petty and insecure. So I kept my head down, I kept doing all the heavy lifting, and I kept letting her shine in the spotlight. Everything finally came to a breaking point about 3 months ago when our agency landed the absolute biggest client in its entire history. It was a massive national retail brand, and our boss, Mr. Henderson, a 50-year-old man who was widely known for his ruthless demands and very short temper, put both of us in charge of the primary pitch. If we nailed this presentation, we were guaranteed major promotions to senior account managers. The stakes were incredibly high, and the pressure in the office was suffocating. For 6 straight weeks, I barely slept a full night. My entire life consisted of staring at my bright computer screen until my eyes burned, obsessing over every single detail of the budget. She was supposed to be handling the creative vision, but she was mysteriously absent a lot of the time. She always had a convenient excuse ready, like a sudden headache or a vague family emergency. I did not complain to anyone. I just silently picked up all the slack and did her work too. I vividly remember one specific night, well past midnight. The large office was completely dark and empty except for me. I was sitting at my desk, surrounded by huge piles of paper, feeling so exhausted I wanted to cry. I texted her, who was supposedly at home recovering from a bad stomach bug, asking for a little help proofreading the financial projections. She never replied. The very next morning, she breezed into the office looking perfectly rested, holding an expensive green juice, and casually told me she had fallen asleep early. I felt a hard knot of bitter resentment form in my stomach, but I pushed it down. I finalized the massive presentation file, saved it carefully to our shared secure network drive, and felt a huge wave of relief wash over my tired body. The morning of the big pitch, I arrived at the office very early, feeling nervous but prepared. I went to open the master presentation file to run through the slides one last time before the important clients arrived. When I clicked the specific folder on the shared drive, my blood ran completely cold in my veins. The file was gone, not just moved, but completely deleted. And not just the presentation file, but the entire folder containing 6 weeks of raw data and vital research. Panic hit me like a physical blow right to the chest. I frantically searched the digital trash bins and the backup folders. Nothing. It was exactly as if the project had never existed at all. I was hyperventilating, my hands shaking so hard I could barely use the mouse. She walked in a few minutes later, took one look at my pale face, and gasped loudly, her hands flying to her mouth in what looked like absolute horror. We had absolutely no choice but to go into the large glass conference room with our boss and the serious executives from the retail brand completely empty-handed. It was undoubtedly the most humiliating and painful hour of my entire life. My boss was visibly furious, his face turning a dark shade of red. The clients were deeply offended by our apparent lack of preparation. I desperately tried to explain that there had been a catastrophic technical failure, but I sounded exactly like a young child making excuses. She sat right next to me, looking incredibly sad and apologetic. She kept looking down at the table, occasionally shooting me pitiful, sympathetic glances. She did not say a single word to defend me or to share the blame for the failure. She just sat there in silence and let me drown completely on my own. When the disgusted clients finally walked out, my boss turned his intense wrath entirely on me. He slammed his heavy fist hard on the wooden conference table, the loud sound echoing sharply in the silent room. He loudly told me I was completely incompetent, dangerously irresponsible, and a massive liability to his company. He said I had single-handedly ruined their professional reputation and cost them millions of dollars in revenue. I was crying openly, pleading with him to please check the IT network logs, swearing on my life that I had completed the work perfectly. But he absolutely did not want to hear a single word of it. He pointed his finger directly at the glass door and told me I was fired, effective immediately right then and there. He told me to go pack my desk and leave the building immediately before he called security. I felt like I was floating outside of my own body. The walk from the conference room back to my desk felt incredibly long, like I was walking through deep, thick mud. I grabbed a dirty, empty cardboard box and started throwing my personal things into it blindly. My vision was completely blurred with hot, angry tears. And that exactly brings us back to the terrible moment I described at the very beginning of this story. The moment I looked over at her desk, I fully expected to see my best friend looking devastated and heartbroken for me. Instead, what I actually saw shattered my reality completely. She was sitting comfortably in her expensive chair, pretending to look intently at her computer monitor, but her shoulders were shaking slightly. She had her hand covering her mouth, trying desperately to stifle a real laugh. Her eyes met mine for just a fraction of a second, and the deep amusement in them was absolutely unmistakable. She was genuinely enjoying this. With me gone, she was the sole tragic survivor of the team, perfectly positioned to take the promotion all for herself. I could not breathe at all. The sudden realization that she had deliberately done this, that she had intentionally deleted the files to sabotage my career, hit me with a violent force that made me physically nauseous. I picked up my heavy box, my legs trembling so violently I honestly thought I would collapse right there on the carpet. I walked slowly toward the glass doors, feeling the heavy weight of dozens of judgmental eyes burning into my back. I stepped out into the lobby, waiting silently for the elevator to take me down to the street and out of this living nightmare forever. The lobby was very quiet, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above my head. I just wanted to completely disappear. My mind was racing with a million questions, but the loudest one was simply, how could someone I loved so much be so incredibly evil and heartless? That is exactly when Marcus approached me. Marcus, a 55-year-old man, was the overnight and early morning security guard for our specific floor. He was a quiet, gentle man with very kind eyes and a warm, genuine smile. I was one of the very few people in that entire corporate office who actually took the time to talk to him every single day. I would always bring him a fresh coffee when I arrived early and ask about his 2 young grandkids. Most of the busy executives treated him like he was completely invisible, just another piece of the office furniture, but I always saw him as a real human being. As I stood there crying silently by the elevator doors, he stepped out from behind his small circular desk. He looked around the lobby very quickly, his eyes darting cautiously toward the glass doors of the office to make absolutely sure no one inside was watching us. He walked right up to me, his expression unusually serious and deeply urgent. He did not say a single word of comfort or pity. Instead, he reached into his dark uniform pocket, pulled out a small folded piece of yellow sticky note, and quickly pressed it into my shaking hand, right beneath the bottom of my cardboard box. He leaned in very close and whispered, his deep voice barely audible over the mechanical hum of the elevator doors finally opening. "Do not leave the building," he whispered urgently. "Go straight down to the basement security office. Ask for Dave. Tell him Marcus sent you to look at camera 4, timestamp 6:15 a.m.
Before I could even process what he was saying or ask him what on earth he meant, he stepped back quickly, gave me a small, firm nod, and returned to his desk, staring straight ahead as if nothing had happened at all. I stepped into the empty elevator, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. I set my heavy box down and unfolded the yellow piece of paper with trembling fingers. Written on it in messy handwriting were just a few words. "I saw her. She used your computer. Get the tape." A massive jolt of adrenaline shot through my entire nervous system. I immediately pressed the button for the basement level. My mind was racing, connecting all the terrible dots. She had come in early. She had used my computer, knowing my password because I had foolishly trusted her with it months ago. She had deleted the files directly from my terminal, so the IT logs would show that my account was responsible. The elevator doors opened to the dark concrete basement. I practically ran toward the heavy door marked security operations. A man in his 40s, Dave, looked up from a bank of glowing monitors. I told Dave that Marcus sent me to check the cameras. He sighed softly, muttered that Marcus was a good guy, and told me to come behind the desk. I stared intently at the large monitor as he pulled up the archived digital footage from that exact morning. The screen flickered, showing the grainy black and white feed from camera 4, positioned directly above our department hallway. The digital timestamp read 6:10 a.m. The office was completely dark. Then, at exactly 6:12 a.m., the motion sensor lights clicked on brightly. A single figure walked quickly down the hall. Even in black and white, I recognized her instantly. It was Chloe. Dave silently switched the view to camera 5, which covered our specific section of desks perfectly. I watched, completely frozen, as my supposed best friend walked straight past her own desk and sat down directly at mine. I watched her quickly type in my private password. I watched her furiously click the mouse for about 3 intense minutes. Then she pulled a small silver USB flash drive from her pocket, plugged it into my computer tower, and waited another minute. She was copying all the files before deleting them. She wanted the work for herself to use later. When she was finally done, she pulled the drive out, slipped it back into her pocket, shut down my computer, and quickly walked away. She had deliberately arrived early, stolen the project, deleted the originals to frame me, and then left the building only to return much later acting perfectly innocent. The betrayal was no longer just an awful idea. It was a recorded fact. I asked Dave to export that exact video clip to a flash drive for me. He silently handed me the small plastic drive a few minutes later, wishing me good luck. I grabbed my box, took the elevator straight back up, and marched boldly back into the main office. People looked up from their computer screens in complete shock that I had actually returned. I walked with a steady, fierce pace straight toward my boss's large corner office. I did not bother to knock. I simply turned the handle and pushed the door wide open. Mr. Henderson snapped his head up, his face turning red with fresh anger. "I thought I told you to leave immediately," he yelled, standing up aggressively. I walked right up to his large mahogany desk, slammed the plastic flash drive down hard on top of it, and stared directly into his furious eyes. "Before you call security to drag me out," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "I highly suggest you plug that drive into your computer and watch the video, unless you enjoy letting the person who truly sabotaged your pitch continue to work for you." He stared at me in complete silence, clearly torn between throwing him out and his own intense curiosity. The absolute certainty in my voice convinced him. He angrily snatched the drive, plugged it into his laptop, and opened the video file.
I watched his expression change rapidly from furious to deeply confused to absolute stunned disbelief. He watched the entire clip twice. Then he reached for his desk phone and pressed a single button. "Send Chloe into my office, right now," he barked into the speakerphone. Less than a minute later, she practically skipped into the office carrying a notepad. When she saw me standing there, her confident smile faltered, but she put on a perfect mask of fake concern. "Sarah, what are you still doing here?" she asked gently. My boss did not say a single word to her. He just turned his laptop screen around so she could see it clearly and hit play on the video. I watched her face closely as she saw herself on the bright screen, sitting at my desk in the dark office. The color completely drained from her cheeks so fast she looked like she might pass out on the floor. Her eyes widened in sheer terror. I can explain," she finally stammered, her voice trembling violently. "I was just checking her work early." My boss stood up, leaning menacingly over the desk. "You deleted the entire company directory for that client. You stole company property. You intentionally sabotaged this agency." He fired her right then and there, on the spot. He told her she had exactly 10 minutes to pack her things under the strict supervision of security, and that the company would be pursuing legal action against her. She started sobbing loudly, begging desperately for a second chance. I felt absolutely nothing for her. I turned my back on her coldly and walked out of the office. My boss called me back into his office later that afternoon. He formally and sincerely apologized to me for his terrible behavior and his aggressive rush to judgment. He not only fully reinstated my job immediately, but he offered me the senior account manager promotion right on the spot, with a very significant pay raise. He asked if I could possibly reconstruct the presentation for my own personal notes and the data she had stolen on the flash drive, which he was forced to surrender before leaving. I told him confidently I could have it perfectly ready by the next morning, and I did exactly that. We pitched the client successfully 2 days later, and we won the massive account. But the absolute biggest victory of that entire terrible week was not the promotion, the money, or even exposing the person who tried to ruin me. The biggest victory was what happened the following Monday morning. I arrived at the building very early, carrying 2 large cups of premium coffee and a box of fresh, expensive pastries. I walked straight up to the lobby desk where Marcus was finishing his shift. I placed the coffee and pastries gently in front of him. He looked up at me, his kind eyes crinkling happily. "I heard you had a very interesting week," he said softly. I reached right across the desk and hugged him tightly. Looking back on that whole awful nightmare, I learned a very painful but absolutely necessary lesson about life. True friendship is not built on shared college dorm rooms. It is built entirely on loyalty, integrity, and exactly how people treat you when there is something for them to gain by destroying you. The person I called my sister was entirely willing to step hard on my neck to get ahead. But a quiet man who owed me absolutely nothing extended his hand to pull me up from the bottom. What about you? Have you ever experienced a deep betrayal from someone you considered a best friend? Or would you have forgiven her in my place? Tell me in the comments. Until the next story.